The safety award from the Texas Oil and Gas Commission hit the wall with a crack that echoed through my office. 20 years of service, and they were handing my keys to some kid who probably couldn't tell a pressure valve from a coffee maker. Andrea from HR stood there with a cardboard box, not meeting my eyes while this Brandon Shaw character measured my office like he was picking out furniture. I'm Frank Pearson, 48 years old. I've been keeping Lone Star Petroleum's refinery running safe for 2 decades, ever since I got out of the Navy. Started on the floor as a maintenance tech, worked my way up through every department. No fancy degree, just sweat and knowledge that keeps people from getting blown to pieces. Let me tell you how I got here. Back in '99, fresh out of my Navy service aboard the USS Constellation, I needed work. The discipline and attention to detail from 4 years as a machinist's mate served me well. But civilian jobs were different. Lone Star hired me to work the refinery floor. Night shifts, grease under my fingernails, learning every pipe and valve in this place. Those early years taught me something you can't get from textbooks. I watched senior guys make mistakes that could have killed people. Saw what happens when safety protocols get cut for production quotas. By year 3, I was writing incident reports that actually prevented accidents instead of just documenting them after the fact. The old safety manager, Bill Rodriguez, no relation to the inspector, took notice, started having me sit in on OSHA meetings. Frank, he'd say, you think like these refinery systems think. That's rare. When Bill retired in '08, I was the natural choice to take over. No business degree, but I knew every bolt in this facility and every regulation that governed it. That's when I started building the relationships that would define my career. Inspector Rodriguez, Maria Rodriguez from the State Commission, Thompson from Environmental Compliance. These weren't just bureaucrats to me, they were professionals doing a job, and I treated them that way. I remembered Rodriguez's daughter enlisting in the Army, attended Thompson's retirement party. When Maria's husband had his heart attack, I sent flowers. It wasn't schmoozing, it was respect. These inspectors had seen every trick companies use to cut corners on safety. They appreciated working with someone who actually cared about getting it right instead of just avoiding fines. Over the years, that trust became invaluable. They'd give us heads up about new regulations, share insights about industry trends, sometimes even warn us when surprise inspections were coming. By 2015, our safety record was spotless. 0 major violations, minimal minor findings, and when issues did come up, we fixed them fast. Other refineries in the region were racking up millions in fines while we sailed through every inspection. The executives loved the numbers. The workers trusted me because they knew I had their backs. Everything was working. Until this morning. He has an MBA from Harvard, Andrea mumbled, still avoiding eye contact. You'll understand, Frank. The board wants fresh perspectives in safety management. Modern approaches to risk assessment. Brandon stepped into my office wearing a suit that cost more than most of my guys make in a week. Frank, right? Brandon Shaw, top 5% of my class at Harvard Business School. Really excited to modernize your safety protocols with data-driven methodologies and predictive analytics. 20 years. 20 years I'd kept this place from becoming a crater in the Texas dirt. I knew every valve, every pressure point, every inspector who walked through our gates. I'd been to Rodriguez's daughter's deployment ceremony, knew Thompson's back went out every winter from his old fieldwork days, remembered when Jackson's wife had cancer and made sure his schedule stayed flexible. These weren't just regulations to me, they were relationships that kept our workers breathing and our company operating. I'd prevented 23 major safety incidents that could have shut us down permanently, saved the company over $150 million in potential fines and remediation costs. And they were handing my life's work to a kid because he had 3 letters after his name. The nameplate comes off easy enough, Brandon said, already touching my door. I can get a new one made tomorrow, maybe something more professional. Director of Safety Analytics has a nice ring to it. Without saying a word, I opened my desk drawer and pulled out my safety log. 20 years of handwritten notes about every inspection, every close call, every lesson learned the hard way. Personal observations about inspector preferences, family details, technical insights that kept us ahead of regulatory changes. I dropped it in the box next to the family photos Andrea was awkwardly gathering. OSHA team arrives at 1400 hours, I said quietly, using military time like I always did. Old habits die hard when they've kept you alive. We'll handle it, Andrea replied, now rearranging my pens on what used to be my desk. Will you? I asked. Inspector Rodriguez is leading today's surprise inspection. His daughter Maria just got back from her 3rd deployment to Afghanistan, She's having trouble adjusting to civilian life. His back's been acting up from that old field injury he got working offshore rigs in the 90s. He takes his coffee black with exactly 2 sugar cubes, not packets, and he expects whoever runs safety to know the new vapor emission protocols OSHA released last month, the ones they haven't officially announced yet. Brandon laughed, adjusting his Harvard class ring. I memorized the entire federal safety manual during orientation week. I think I can handle one routine inspection. I nodded once, dropped my security badge on top of the box, and walked out. The entire floor went dead silent as I passed through the main work area. Jenny from accounting covered her mouth with both hands. Carlos from maintenance stared at his steel-toed boots like they held the secrets of the universe. Leo from the engineering department just shook his head. Not one of them said a word, but their faces told the whole story. They knew what was coming. See, what Brandon and the board didn't understand was that safety management in an oil refinery isn't about memorizing manuals. It's about understanding that every valve, every pressure gauge, every seemingly minor protocol exists because someone, somewhere, died when it wasn't followed properly. My guys on the floor knew this. They'd seen me crawl into confined spaces to check welds personally, override production quotas when safety margins got tight, and fight with executives who wanted to push equipment past safe operating limits. By 12:30, I was sitting in my pickup truck in the parking lot, watching OSHA vehicles pull up to the main gate through my windshield. 3 white government SUVs with official plates. Rodriguez was bringing a full team, which meant this wasn't a routine inspection. This was a comprehensive safety audit, the kind that could shut down operations for weeks if they found significant violations. My phone started buzzing around 12:45. Text messages from the crew, panic in every word. Carlos: Frank, Rodriguez won't talk to anyone but you. Brandon's freaking out. Jenny: they're asking for documentation going back 3 years. Brandon can't find half of it. Leo: Rodriguez just asked about the new emission protocols. Brandon said what protocols? I turned off my phone and watched the show. Through the main office windows, I could see people running around like the building was on fire. Which, in a way, it was. The kind of fire that burns through corporate arrogance and leaves nothing but expensive lessons behind. At exactly 1:15 p.m., the CEO's assistant Sarah came running out of the building like her designer heels were rocket boosters. She spotted my truck and ran across the asphalt, not caring that the Texas heat was probably melting her makeup. When she reached my window, she was gasping for air like she'd just finished a marathon. Frank, please, she panted, hands pressed against my truck door. You have to come back. Rodriguez is threatening to shut us down completely. He won't speak to anyone but you. Brandon tried showing him his Harvard diploma and Rodriguez literally walked out of the room. I checked my watch. How's that MBA working out for everyone? If you've ever been thrown under the bus by people who thought credentials mattered more than competence, you know exactly how this felt. That moment when they suddenly realized they just made the biggest mistake of their corporate lives. Pure satisfaction doesn't begin to describe it. Rodriguez gave us exactly 20 minutes to get you back in that building, or he's issuing a critical safety violation and recommending immediate operational suspension, Sarah continued, sweat beading on her forehead. Do you have any idea what that would do to our stock price, our insurance rates, our operating license? I'm aware, I replied calmly. I've prevented 23 potential critical violations in my time here. Each one would have cost about $75 million in fines, remediation, and lost production, not counting the lives that could have been lost. Her eyes widened as the full scope of what they'd thrown away hit her. Frank, name your price. Executive Vice President Operations, your office back, double salary, whatever you want. Mr. Garrett authorized me to offer anything. I stared through the windshield at the refinery towers, thinking about all those years of 3 a.m. emergency calls, weekend safety drills, and budget fights with executives who saw safety equipment as unnecessary expense. Tell me something, Sarah. Was it Garrett's idea to replace me, or did the board push for someone with an Ivy League pedigree? Board Chair Patricia Manning led the charge, she admitted, her professional facade cracking. She kept saying we needed professionalism in safety management, someone with academic credentials who understood modern risk assessment frameworks and could interface with regulatory agencies at a higher level. Her air quotes around higher level told me everything I needed to know. Patricia Manning, who'd joined the board 3 months ago with an impressive resume from tech companies, who'd never set foot on a refinery floor, never seen what happens when safety protocols fail, never watched good people get hurt because someone cut corners to make quarterly numbers look better. I checked my watch again. 15 minutes until Rodriguez issued that violation, and our insurance company started asking uncomfortable questions about why we'd fired our safety director on the same day we failed a major inspection. Here's what I want, Sarah. Executive VP Operations title with direct reporting to the CEO, not some committee. 60% salary increase, my office back exactly like it was, and I want Brandon to work as my deputy for the next 6 months minimum, so he can learn how safety actually works in the real world. Done, she said without hesitation, relief flooding her voice. And one more thing, I added as she started to turn away. I want Patricia Manning to personally acknowledge her mistake in front of the entire executive team. Public admission that she was wrong. Sarah hesitated for the first time, corporate loyalty warring with desperation. That's asking a lot, Frank. She's the board chair. Then enjoy explaining to the shareholders why we got shut down by OSHA on the same day we fired the guy who could have prevented it. The math was simple. Patricia's pride versus the company's survival. Even a Harvard MBA could figure out that equation. 4 minutes later, I was walking through the main gate, my steel-toed boots clicking on concrete with the authority of someone who belonged there. Executives lined the hallway looking like they'd seen a ghost walk back from the dead. Their mistake was about to become very expensive education. Rodriguez sat in conference room A, arms crossed, 2 junior inspectors beside him looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. The moment he saw me walk through the door, his stern expression softened just enough to let me know we were still on the same page. "Cutting it close, Frank," he said, checking his government-issued watch. "Traffic on I-45, I replied with a slight grin. "How's Maria adjusting to civilian life?" His face lit up the way any father's does when you ask about his kid. "Still waking up at 0300 expecting incoming mortars. Says the food here's a hell of a lot better than MRE's, but she misses the structure. Thinking about using her GI benefits for engineering school. Smart girl. Tell her the petroleum engineering program at UT is top-notch if she's interested in this industry." Rodriguez nodded, then his eyes shifted to where Brandon stood clutching a 3-ring binder, hands visibly shaking. The kid looked like he was about to face a firing squad instead of a safety inspection. "Your replacement here tried telling me about the new vapor emission monitoring systems you'd supposedly installed," Rodriguez continued, his voice taking on that flat tone inspectors use when they're not buying what you're selling. "Said you guys had implemented advanced leak detection protocols across the entire facility." I nodded, pulling up the real documentation on my phone. "We have, Rodriguez. For Category 3 chemical storage units only, and only after passing the additional environmental impact assessments your department approved last quarter. The full facility upgrade is scheduled for Phase 2, pending the new federal guidelines due out next month." Rodriguez raised an eyebrow, genuinely impressed. "You've been keeping up with the regulatory pipeline. I helped draft the industry comments on those Phase 2 protocols," I said. "Submitted them through the American Petroleum Institute Working Group back in February." What Brandon didn't understand, what no business school teaches, is that regulatory compliance isn't about memorizing current rules. It's about understanding where the rules are heading, who's writing them, and why. I'd spent 20 years not just following regulations, but helping shape them through industry working groups, professional associations, and direct feedback to regulatory agencies. For the next 4 hours, I guided Rodriguez and his team through every critical system in the refinery. We started in the control room, where I showed them our real-time monitoring setup for pressure differentials, temperature variations, and gas concentrations. Brandon trailed behind us like a lost puppy, frantically taking notes while I explained the reasoning behind each protocol. "This alarm threshold seems conservative," noted Inspector Williams, one of Rodriguez's junior staff. "Industry standard allows for 15% variance before triggering alerts. We set ours at 8%, I explained, pulling up the historical data on the control room monitors. 3 years ago, we had an incident where standard thresholds would have been too late. System pressure spiked to 12% above normal before our conservative alarm caught it. Investigation showed a valve seal was degrading faster than manufacturer specifications predicted." Williams was scribbling notes furiously. "What was your response protocol?" "Immediate controlled shutdown of that processing unit, full system inspection, and replacement of all seals from that manufacturing batch across the facility. Cost us $300,000 in downtime and parts, but prevented what could have been a catastrophic failure." Rodriguez was nodding as I spoke. This was the kind of proactive safety management that kept inspectors from digging too deep into your operations. When they see you're already thinking 3 steps ahead of potential problems, they focus on documentation rather than hunting for violations. We moved through the facility systematically, storage tanks, processing units, emergency response equipment, environmental monitoring stations. At each stop, I introduced Rodriguez to crew members by name, asked about their families, demonstrated that I knew not just the technical requirements, but the human side of safety management. "Hey, Carlos," I called to our senior maintenance tech as we passed the pump house. "How's your son doing in college?" "Dean's List again, Frank. Says that scholarship recommendation letter you wrote made all the difference." Rodriguez watched this interaction with the kind of approval you can't fake. He'd seen plenty of safety managers who knew the regulations but treated workers like equipment. The difference between compliance and culture isn't something you can learn in a classroom. Brandon, meanwhile, was getting a real-world education in how industrial relationships actually work. When we reached the emergency response trailer, I pulled out equipment he'd never seen before: specialized leak detection devices, atmospheric monitoring gear, evacuation coordination radios. Each of these units costs about $15,000, I explained, handing him a handheld gas detector. "But they're worthless if your people don't know how to use them properly. How do you think we should test this equipment?" Brandon stared at the device like I'd handed him alien technology. Regular calibration according to manufacturer specifications? That's maintenance, not testing." "Carlos, show him the real drill." Carlos activated the emergency beacon, and within 90 seconds we had 6 crew members in full protective gear running response scenarios like their lives depended on it, because someday they might. Rodriguez was taking detailed notes, but I could tell he was impressed. His questions shifted from probing for violations to understanding our methods. That's when you know an inspection is going well, when the inspector starts asking how you do things instead of whether you're doing them right. When we finished the facility tour, Rodriguez gathered his team for their preliminary assessment. I could see Brandon sweating through his expensive shirt, still clutching that binder full of theoretical knowledge that hadn't helped him once during the actual inspection. But I wasn't just thinking about passing this inspection anymore. During those 4 hours of walking through our facility, explaining our protocols, and demonstrating our safety culture, I'd been formulating something bigger. A plan that would ensure no one ever questioned the value of real expertise again. When Rodriguez finally signed off on the inspection, declaring us not just compliant, but commended for exemplary safety culture and proactive risk management, CEO Garrett pulled me into his office like his career depended on it, which, honestly, it probably did. "Frank, you saved us," he said, loosening his tie like he'd just survived a heart attack. "You were irreplaceable." "You made a mistake," I replied, settling into the chair across from his mahogany desk. "Yes, we did. A big one." He leaned forward, desperation creeping into his voice. "Now let's discuss how we're going to fix this permanently." But Garrett didn't know what I'd really been planning during those 4 hours with Rodriguez. See, what none of them understood was that I hadn't just been saving today's inspection. I'd been gathering intelligence for something much bigger. Over the next 2 weeks, I systematically reclaimed not just my authority, but expanded it beyond what I'd ever had before. My new title came with a corner office twice the size of my old one, direct reporting to the CEO, and budget authority that made me one of the most powerful people in the company. Brandon, meanwhile, was getting the education of his life. I took him to every safety meeting, every regulatory conference, every informal lunch with inspectors. The kid was smart, I'll give him that. By week 3, he'd stopped mentioning Harvard and started asking the right questions about how industrial relationships actually work. "Why did you remember Inspector Williams's concern about atmospheric monitoring from 18 months ago?" Brandon asked after one particularly technical meeting. "Because Williams has a background in chemical engineering before he joined OSHA," I explained. When an inspector with that kind of technical depth raises a concern, even informally, you listen. That casual comment saved us from a major violation during today's inspection. Brandon was scribbling notes like his career depended on it. They definitely didn't teach us that kind of relationship intelligence at Harvard. "No business school can teach you 20 years of trust building," I said, "but you can learn it in 6 months if you pay attention and check your ego at the door." One evening, working late in my restored office, I put the final pieces of my plan into motion. See, during my years of building relationships with safety inspectors across Texas, I'd learned something valuable. Information flows both ways. When you're trusted by regulatory officials, they sometimes share concerns about other facilities. Concerns that smart companies pay attention to. I pulled up my secure files and began composing the email that would change everything. During my 20 years of relationship building, I documented safety violations at our three largest competitors, Apex Drilling, Gulf Coast Petroleum, and Titan Energy. Violations that federal investigators had been quietly building cases around for months. The next morning, I called an emergency board meeting. Patricia Manning walked in looking like she'd rather face a firing squad, flanked by executives who couldn't meet my eyes. I want to discuss our competitive position in light of recent regulatory developments, I began, distributing sealed folders to each board member. Patricia opened hers first, and I watched the color drain from her face. What am I looking at, Frank? Evidence that our three largest competitors have been systematically violating federal safety protocols while bribing mid-level regulatory officials to overlook critical issues, I replied calmly. Specifically, Apex has been falsifying atmospheric monitoring data for 18 months. Gulf Coast has been operating storage tanks above rated pressure limits. Titan has been dumping industrial waste in violation of EPA guidelines. The room erupted in nervous whispers. Board member Harrison looked up from his folder with wide eyes. How did you obtain this information? Relationships, I said simply. The same ones Patricia deemed less valuable than an MBA. Federal investigators have been building cases against these companies for months. They've kept me informed because of the trust we've built over 2 decades. I clicked to the next slide on my presentation screen. These companies will face federal charges within 30 days. When that happens, we have 2 options. Option 1, become a cooperative witness, sharing our industry expertise to help investigators understand technical violations. This provides us immunity and potentially exclusive access to government contracts when our competitors face operational suspension. Patricia's hands were shaking as she flipped through the documentation. And option 2, be investigated alongside them. Without someone federal agents trust vouching for our compliance, we'd be presumed guilty by association until proven otherwise. CEO Garrett leaned forward, understanding dawning in his eyes. You're saying our cooperation could eliminate our 3 largest competitors? I'm saying our expertise, my expertise, could position us as the most trusted operator in the Texas petroleum industry when the federal hammer falls. I paused, letting that sink in. Which brings me to my restructuring proposal. I distributed a second set of folders containing my expansion plan for the safety department, my appointment to the newly created position of Chief Risk Officer, and a recommendation that I join the Federal Petroleum Safety Advisory Board as an industry representative. The vote was unanimous. Even Patricia, faced with the choice between her pride and the company's survival, voted to approve my proposal. 3 weeks later, the federal charges became public. As predicted, our competitors' stock prices collapsed as safety violations were exposed. Lone Star Petroleum, positioned as the cooperative industry leader with exemplary safety practices, saw its market value increase by 45% in a single week. I sat in my expanded executive office, watching news coverage of Apex Drilling's CEO being led away in handcuffs when Brandon knocked on my door. Your 6-month deputy term officially ends tomorrow, I told him as he entered. I've created a new position, Director of Regulatory Intelligence. It reports directly to me, carries significant independent authority, and requires both formal education and demonstrated relationship management skills. Brandon's eyes widened with understanding. You're offering me a promotion? I'm offering you the chance to earn one. The position starts with a 6-month probationary period where you'll prove you've learned the lessons I've been teaching. Why would you do this? After how I came in here? I considered the question carefully, looking out my window at the refinery that had been my life's work. Because the best revenge isn't just destroying your enemies, Brandon. It's transforming the system that created them. That evening, I received a call from the Federal Petroleum Safety Advisory Board. Outstanding work on the industry cleanup, Frank, the chairman said. The board is forming a new committee to help reshape safety regulations across the petroleum industry. We need someone who understands both sides, technical expertise and regulatory relationships. Someone with integrity. As I hung up the phone, I opened my desk drawer and placed my old nameplate next to a new one. Frank Pearson, Chief Risk Officer and Federal Safety Advisory Board member. Not bad for someone without an MBA. If you've ever been written off because you didn't have the right letters after your name, I hope Frank's story reminds you that experience is the degree that matters most. The sweetest victory isn't just getting your job back, it's proving that real expertise can't be replaced by credentials. Sometimes the best revenge is showing them exactly how much they never understood what you were really worth.